Human beings have always searched for catharsis, that moment when built-up tension is finally allowed to escape. It's why we scream on roller coasters, sing among thousands at concerts, erupt when a last-minute goal hits the net, or laugh immediately after something frightens us. The pressure is what makes the release feel so good. Resident Evil Requiem understood this perfectly. Leon's sections were the cathartic release from the fear and vulnerability of playing as Grace. Mortal Shell 2 feels like the cathartic release from, well, decades of soul-destroying Souls games. Souls games, let's be honest, their fans have always boasted loudly about difficulty. Completing one became a badge of honour that no mere mortal could possibly achieve. And then, the moment we finished one, we all went online to tell everybody else how easy it was, how it was a skill issue. You know you did it, I know I did it, we all did it. But after your 500th memorised boss pattern and your millionth perfectly timed parry, you start to realise something. You've already got the t-shirt, you've worn it, and to be honest, it smells a little bit. So eventually, you stop hoping for another game that merely proves that you can survive the genre and start hoping somebody will let you just bloody enjoy the genre. And by God, I think that game might finally be here, because Mortal Shell 2 removes the stamina bar, loosens the leash, and asks a much more exciting question than, can you endure this pain? It asks you, what type of monster can you become, and how can you inflict pain on the game? This is a Souls-like with the soul of that effortlessly fun bloke at the party, the one everybody at least likes having around a little bit, but at most, everybody absolutely adores him, and all the geared up meatheads are just posing in the corner looking at the mirror. And although Mortal Shell 2 does have some problems, nearly every good idea in its gameplay sandbox feeds into a wonderful loop. Explore, experiment, grow stronger, fulfill a class fantasy, and then find a way to express all that pent-up rage of decades of Souls games onto every being in this world. Most Souls games feel like a journey of attrition. Mortal Shell 2 feels like a journey of angry expression. Removing stamina sounds like a small mechanical change, but it completely alters the emotional rhythm of combat. You're no longer standing 6 feet away from an enemy waiting for the green bar to refill before you're allowed to have a bit of fun again. You can attack, dodge, reposition, and keep applying pressure. Combat feels less like a test of patience and more like active, front-foot engagement. That doesn't mean the game abandons core Souls principles. You still have to read attacks, respect positioning, and understand when greed will get you killed. For example, ranged builds may be viable, but many of them still need melee attacks, pattern recognition, and resource generation to keep them firing on all cylinders. So the fundamentals remain, but the training wheels are really taken off. Combat has weight, each hit feels heavy, riposte feel vicious. Finishes are wonderfully excessive and varied due to the variety of finishes and the evolving nature of the builds and the tools at your disposal as the game progresses. The issue with repetitive enemies didn't really bother me too much because there was always a new and more powerful way to dispatch them. You will become overly familiar with its recurring faces, particularly when they are just recolored, but because the enemies are so satisfying to dispatch and because your method of dispatching them keeps evolving, the repetition never dulls the experience. It is a very expressive combat system and one that does mask the flaws of its lack of enemy variety. That expression begins with the shells. Rather than asking you to pour individual points into vaguely explained stats and then discover through some ancient wiki entry that 3 of them barely affect your build in the game handles the basic statistical growth for you. What you choose are your meaningful skills within your build. Each shell has a focused, readable ability tree, so it's difficult to completely ruin a character. Instead of getting lost inside a spreadsheet, you can concentrate on fulfilling a class fantasy. And each of the main shells has really distinct roles. Teal, for example, one of the first shells you get, and the shell I played, is Agile, a shadowy assassin playing around an aggressive dodge. Proxima is a mobile controller that can close distance. Eredrim, an executioner-style tank. Gragu is a heavyweight brawler, Smirt a kind of monk martial artist who can pause time, Laszlo is an armoured furnace who can explode, Sariel is a curse and condition specialist who weaponizes parasitic thorns, and Janessa can summon spectral survivors as like a mini necromancer style thing. It's a brilliant class system, it provides class fantasy, provides a little bit of direction without removing the player's imagination. The weapon system of Mortal Shell 2 support the philosophy beautifully. The philosophy of a little bit of simplicity and a lot of fun. It doesn't bury you beneath 50 swords, whose biggest difference is that one does 4% more damage on a Tuesday. Instead, it focuses on roughly 8 main weapons and 8 ranged weapons, supported by an assortment of Tarstones. With 10 Tarstone slots available, think of them as gems with unique skill upgrades or stat upgrades. There is an enormous amount of power sitting inside these systems. Each of these stones can be upgraded to level 3, with each upgrade providing big power jumps. One stone may strengthen a particular attack, the other may infuse your weapon permanently with fire or poison, the other may make your ranged weapon fire down from the sky, the other may spread it out in a cone, the other may add confusion or freeze, and that is why exploration works so well. You never know what Tarstone is going to emerge on your path and how much that can change the way you play the game. And trust me, all of these Tarstones really do impact your playstyle. The game doesn't need to bribe you with disposable loot every 30 seconds, and as a result, an optional dungeon isn't merely content, it could contain the missing component of your build. A difficult encounter isn't merely an obstacle, it could be the thing that makes the next 10 encounters significantly more fun. So it's all really feeding that same power curve engine. Exploration gives you options create builds, and the builds turn combat into joyous release. You are not slowly scraping your way towards statistical adequacy. You are assembling permission to become an absurd killing monster. And importantly for me, and this is one thing I just love about Mortal Shell 2, the power curve leans eventually strongly towards the player. Many Soulslikes seem terrified that the player might become too powerful, often due to PvP balancing, almost as though enjoyment has to be rationed for the good of the genre. Mortal Shell 2 is much happier to let your build become the reward. And when everything clicks, you don't merely survive this world, you impose your will upon it. Now, being honest, I don't think the beginning of the game creates the best first impression. Yes, it's visually stunning, but your build hasn't taken shape, your options are limited, and I really don't feel the game has found its identity early doors. But the world definitely carries in the early hours. Its gloomy forests, half-buried ruins, and enormous structures fading into the fog create this constant impression that this is a dangerous world begging to be explored. The world is interconnected, visually striking, and wonderfully constructed, with enough environmental variety to keep it fresh without turning it into a collection of unrelated biomes. And crucially, exploration rarely feels disconnected from progression. Beacons, this game's versions of bonfires, frequently lead to self-contained challenges, strange little spaces, and optional dungeons. You never quite know whether activating one will reveal a short combat test, an enemy gauntlet, or a gloomy descent into something completely weird and bizarre altogether. And that uncertainty and that promise of something to make your character stronger is difficult to ignore. Tarstones, a core concept of the game that drive exploration, and something I'll come onto in a minute, are not only extremely powerful but extremely varied and can be found everywhere. The initial mystery and vastness of this world gets you through the door, but the build crafting is what really makes you stay. Unfortunately though, this is also where the game's most frustrating contradiction appears. The build sandbox is the best thing about Mortal Shell 2, but the progression economy makes experimenting with that sandbox far more difficult than it should be. I am not a fan of Tarstone leveling in this game. To fully improve the stones you actually want, the game pushes you towards upgrading others you do not want. This then generates a stone or a core, which then can be used to upgrade the cores you actually use in your build. This results in a lull in the middle of the game where you constantly are equipping Tarstones you don't want to use to upgrade Tarstones you do want to use. It isn't good design and it can be easily fixed. In a game that prioritizes fun and a lack of friction for the player, it then randomly decides to lock its best features behind a decent amount of friction. The same goes for the upgrading of the shells. You have so many fantastic shells with their own unique personalities, and you hide them behind unnecessary busy work. It means the game presents 8 genuinely interesting playstyles, then makes it unnecessarily laborious to experience more than 2 of them. It's friction placed directly in front of the game's greatest strength, and it's such a shame. At the time of recording, only around 6% of players on my platform, which is Steam, had completed the game. It would be damn shame if even fewer experienced its brilliant range of shells simply because the economy discouraged them from switching. I would genuinely love to start New Game Plus and level another 1 or 2 shells, but September is packed, so when will I find time? Probably never, and for most players, probably never. We are so time poor at the moment, so I do encourage Critcisms to loosen the restrictions on shell leveling and just let us have some fun. Maybe in New Game Plus, once you've finished the game, give people a crap ton of economy and crap ton of coins and souls and whatever to help them level up other shells. Because replay value only matters when players can realistically reach it. Other criticisms such as boss fights, mostly forgettable, though there are some standouts. But as well as there being standouts, there are some annoying fights, like this guy. But I think that's also a side effect of allowing the player to get powerful. Some of these bosses just melt away later on in the game. The story itself, I mean, it's a Souls-like. To be honest, I don't expect a lot from a Souls-like story. It's a cocktail of ghostly whispers, vague riddles, and unexplained nouns. You know how it goes by now. There is a difference between mystery and obscurity, and I think Souls games definitely go more towards obscurity. But you know, the world tells its own story. I do think this world feels very lived in, very downtrodden, very worn away at, and I'm happy for the atmosphere to be the story. The soundtrack verges on way too ambient for my liking and lacks a punch on the boss fights. Moving on from that, technically I think the game is fantastic. It looks beautiful, runs very well, the architecture in the game is brilliant. Yes, there are bugs and I had a fair few crashes, maybe between 10 and 15, and 1 or 2 odd bugs, one when I was carrying a lot of gloom, where I fell through a hole in the floor and just died. But by the end of it, I had forgotten about these bugs. Early doors I was a bit worried, but by the end, the sheer enjoyment of Mortal Shell 2 completely overshadows any of the bad stuff. Mortal Shell 2 begins by asking you to survive its brutal world. It's a strange world, dangerous, difficult to read. Your early build feels incomplete, and every new path carries risk. But somewhere along that path, the relationship changes. Cold symmetry allow it to change in the player's favour. The enemy variety begins to wear thin, but your build variety blossoms. The bosses don't always rise to the occasion, but your combat options do. The story disappears into riddles, but the mechanical purpose of exploring becomes crystal clear. Every dungeon, beacon, weapon, and Tarstone feeds a growing sense of ownership over the way you play and over the way you dominate the landscape. And that is why the rough edges did not push me away, and I would invite everybody, if you're either a veteran Souls player or looking to get your foot in the door, to experience Mortal Shell at its fantastic price point of £40. For all its uneven bosses, restrictive upgrade economy, vague storytelling, and technical blemishes, everything at the centre of the game is joyous release. The builds, the combat, the animations, the ripostes, and those gloriously grotesque finishes. The funny thing about Mortal Shell 2 is it isn't less engaging because it lacks a challenge or lacks attrition. It actually makes it more engaging by replacing the attrition with expression. It understands that challenge is not the only reward these games can offer. A bit of challenge is always good, but sometimes that reward is discovery, sometimes it's experimentation. Sometimes it is watching 10 carefully selected Tarstones turn your once fragile husk of a body into an apocalyptic build that makes you grin from ear to ear. Mortal Shell 2 eventually hands you its systems and asks you to show it what you've got, and in doing so, it injects something back into the genre that too many of its imitators have forgotten. It's not about being an easier soul, it's not about being a casual soul, it's about being a fun soul. Thanks so much, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, if you liked my take on it. Tell me if you had fun with Mortal Shell 2. Peace!